MrsSperry.com presents Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 5, Summary. Juliet is at home in the garden. She says the clock had shown it had been 9 a.m. when she had sent the nurse to Romeo. The nurse had said she would be back in half an hour. It is now noon, and 3 hours have passed. What has happened? Juliet thinks it is possible that the nurse could not find Romeo. Then Juliet thinks the nurse must have found Romeo, but she is slow. Juliet says that love's heralds should be thoughts which move 10 times faster than the light from the sun. This means that Juliet thinks that messengers who have messages about love should be fast. They should move as fast as thoughts. Juliet also says that love's messengers should be strong enough to push shadows back from the dark hills. Juliet says that love's messages travel quickly because the goddess of love, Venus, has doves that fly her around, and Cupid has wings to fly himself. Juliet says that if the nurse had feelings and were young, she would move fast like a ball. Juliet's words would bounce the nurse to Romeo, and Romeo's words would bounce the nurse back to Juliet. Juliet says that many old people act like they are dead. They are slow, fat, and without much color, like lead. The nurse and Peter come back. Juliet now calls the nurse a nice word, honey, and asks if she met Romeo and tells her to send Peter away. After the nurse tells Peter to wait by the gate, Juliet asks the nurse why she looks sad. Juliet says that if the nurse's news is bad, she still should make it as happy as possible, and if the news is good, the nurse should not ruin it by making her face look sad. The nurse has decided to have fun with Juliet by making her think the news is bad and by telling it very slowly. The nurse says her bones are aching and she is tired because she has walked everywhere in Verona. Juliet says she wishes the nurse had her bones and she had the nurse's news. She tells the nurse to speak. The nurse asks Juliet to wait. The nurse says she needs to breathe. Juliet says if the nurse has breath to complain about being out of breath, then she has enough breath to tell Juliet what Romeo has said. Again, she tells the nurse to speak. Juliet can wait for details, but is the news good or bad? The nurse says that Juliet has made a foolish choice. Juliet has chosen a man whose face and body are more handsome than any other man's. Juliet has chosen a man who is not the most courteous, but who is gentle as a lamb. The nurse then says that Juliet should do what she wants, but she should serve God and be good. Then the nurse asks if Juliet has eaten lunch yet. Note, when the nurse says that Juliet has made a simple choice, foolish choice, by choosing Romeo to be her husband, she is using verbal irony. She means exactly the opposite as her later words show. She compliments Romeo and shows that she thinks Juliet has made a good choice. Juliet says she has not had lunch. She says the nurse has not said anything Juliet did not already know. Juliet asks the nurse to tell her what Romeo has said about their marriage. The nurse says she has a headache and a backache. She says it was bad for Juliet to have sent her all over town. The nurse says she could get sick and die. Juliet says she's sorry the nurse is not feeling well, but what does Juliet's love, Romeo, say? The nurse pretends to start answering by saying, "Your love says, like an honest gentleman," but then she asks, "Where's your mother?" The nurse's question makes Juliet angry. She says her mother is inside and asks where else her mother would be and why the nurse would say that Romeo's message is, "Where's your mother?" The nurse says that Juliet's impatience is not helping the nurse to feel better. She says that from now on, Juliet can give her own messages. Juliet says that the nurse is making everything very difficult. Again, Juliet asks what Romeo said. The nurse asks Juliet if she has permission to go to confession to tell Friar Lawrence her sins. Juliet says she does have permission. The nurse says to go to Friar Lawrence's cell, small room. Juliet will find a husband, Romeo, there who will make her his wife. The nurse sees Juliet's face turn red. The nurse says, "Now comes the wanton blood up in your cheeks." The nurse thinks Juliet is thinking about her wedding night. The nurse tells Juliet to go to the church and to Friar Lawrence. The nurse will go get the rope ladder that Romeo will use to climb up to Juliet's room that night. The nurse will work now, but Juliet will do her wifely work that night. Juliet will have sex with Romeo. The nurse says she will get some lunch before getting the ladder, but Juliet should go to the church in Friar Lawrence's room now.